There is a brilliance to the way unsuspecting Xbox owners booted up their Xboxes and were greeted by that unexpected variation of the Bungie intro. Tiny organic cells taking the form of the Earth, with a bombastic drum solo playing in the background, as the image slowly zooms out to reveal the iconic game company ending with a holy chorus. And that brief moment of silence is instantly followed by this.
Have I died and gone to heaven?
You are greeted by an image of a mysterious construct floating in the deepest reaches of space, with the camera slowly circling around it. The mystery hooks you in as you continue to look at this mysterious ring-shaped planet, wondering what it could possibly mean. The scale of this construct is overwhelming but nonetheless majestic in its design, and as you ponder, a ghostly choir sings in the background, creating a soothing atmosphere. Its haunting yet comforting tone accompanied by the relaxing image of the ring makes you forget for a single moment that you just booted up a video game, and you actually believe that you've been taken out of reality into another world entirely. For me and many others, this was our first ever experience with an Xbox console, and I cannot think of a better introduction to the Xbox than Halo: Combat Evolved. This was the game that changed everything. Even in 2021, it's still considered one of the greatest ever made. A true masterpiece that shows the potential of video games as an art form. And I happen to be one of those people. This game shaped the first-person shooter in ways that I cannot describe with words. The influence, the impact, the tone, and the way it was all carefully wrapped in a package of engaging gameplay, unforgettable atmosphere, and a simple yet gripping story that remains a cornerstone of not just Xbox, but video games as an entity. And with this being its 20th anniversary, I feel it's only appropriate to look back on this game to see just how it became an icon that would give way to one of the most legendary video game franchises of all time. This is Halo: Combat Evolved, a legendary masterpiece. Now, an important thing to know about Halo is that its development has a pretty complicated history. At the time that it was first being made, Bungie was going through several ideas as to what exactly Halo was going to be. First it was a real-time strategy game, then it was an RPG, then it was a third-person shooter. But Bungie ended up going bankrupt during its development and ran the risk of going under. But Microsoft struck a deal and bought them out as they continued their development on this unsuspecting project, on the condition that they had to speed up and prioritize the game's development within that same year. And against all odds, Bungie managed to get the game completed on time, as it came out on November 15th, 2001. They had to make a lot of sacrifices in the process, but little did they know just how much those sacrifices were about to pay off. You start the campaign and from the very beginning, it keeps you hooked at the edge of your seat. The opening cutscene gives us a clear framing of the game's story without raising any confusing questions. This presentation allows the introduction to be fairly cut and dry, setting up the stakes in a way that's easy to follow. Humans and aliens are at war, and we'll be playing as the humans. We're not provided any massive exposition on the history of the war, why the humans and Covenant are fighting, or how we got here, because the game doesn't need that information. We're able to understand the basic premise because the game provides a simple prospect on what it will be focusing on. Eventually you take control of John 1117, more commonly known as Master Chief, the last remaining member of elite super soldiers known as the Spartans. This segment takes you through a small tutorial where you learn about the game's more basic mechanics, such as movement, camera control, and the shield recharge system. Now, two of these three things isn't anything out of the ordinary, but what truly comes across as interesting is how the shield recharge is presented. As you take damage from enemy fire, the blue bar in the upper right corner starts to deplete. This bar represents your shield, and the cells underneath it represent your health. If your shield bar depletes completely, you'll begin to lose health in substitution. And to keep yourself from losing health, you have to avoid taking damage until your shields recharge. Of all the unique changes this game brings to the first-person shooter formula, this is possibly the most unique. You've probably seen a lot of shooting games using regenerative health, where all you have to do is hide behind cover until you eventually get all your health back. This makes the gameplay less interesting with little risk behind it, since all you have to do is avoid damage for a set period of time and you regain all your health. So the player gets to be reckless without much drawback. Halo approaches this mechanic in a similar way, but with an interesting twist. Unlike your shields, your health doesn't regenerate over time. Once you lose health, it stays that way until you find a health pack. This helps encourage the player to plan out how they'll engage groups of enemies, to form a strategy and from which angle to approach them. It also helps to preserve a sense of challenge by giving us a mechanic that penalizes recklessness. You probably think this just translates to, I can be as reckless as I want and be all offensive as long as I have shields. But the gameplay is designed in a way that encourages you to preserve your shields. They protect your health, making them a very valuable tool. Instead of exploiting it, you should focus on keeping it reserved at all times, because you never know when an enemy is going to use a weapon that will drain half the bar in a single shot. There's a real sense of strategy and defensive play that comes with this addition to the gameplay, where one little thing adds so much to the combat. After the tutorial, the ship falls under attack by the enemy, as you must make your way through the chaos to safety. Eventually, you meet a fellow soldier who guides you to the front of the ship, where you meet Captain Keyes, and what follows is one of my favorite cutscenes in the entire game. Because the things that are presented in this one scene establish so many things about the experience Halo provides, at least narrative-wise. We meet Captain Keyes as he debriefs us on the situation. The Pillar of Autumn is lost and they must evacuate the ship. Keyes orders Chief to take Cortana with him, to keep her out of the hands of the Covenant. If they get her, they'll learn about Earth and all of humanity's weaknesses. In this 2-minute cutscene, we have everything we need to know, and we see 3 major strengths regarding this scene. 1. The stakes. Much like the opening cutscene, we get the needed information about the situation. We're able to understand the basic premise of what's happening and the severity of what's going on. Cortana is an ally, and a library of information. She must be safeguarded from the enemy at all cost. The ship is going down, and we must evacuate immediately. The necessities are given to us so we feel the weight and cost of the possibility of failure, keeping you invested in what's going to happen next. 2. The characters. In spite of this cutscene only being 2 minutes long, we already learned so much about them. Not just their personalities, but the chemistry between them. Master Chief has a serious and stoic nature, who tends to be silent, which explains his low speaking tone. He also must be the most hardened and experienced of the soldiers, as Keyes is choosing him to be responsible with Cortana, giving his character a sense of empowerment. On the other hand, Cortana has a very sarcastic nature. She's a program with process, but she still behaves and thinks like a human being. She acts as a foil to Chief's more brooding attitude, but also has a close partnership with him. They also have a history together, which is made clear by the way they interact, painting some intrigue for their relationship. You instantly feel invested in Chief and Cortana, as the game proceeds to throw them into the fight of their lives. 3. The expression. A lot of people like to make fun of how dated the graphics are, but the cutscenes have aged pretty well in terms of expression. In spite of the game's look being primitive, they still added so much detail to the body language and facial tone of the models. For example, look at this.
Excellent work, Cortana. Thank you. Are you ready?
Yank me.
Cortana looks worried and uncertain. She looks around for a moment, thinking if she's ready. In spite of how unsure she is, she knows they're out of time and need to leave. She closes her eyes, lowers her head, and gives the order to yank her. They put so much weight and expression in her movements that it adds a sense of life to her body language. In spite of the graphics being a product of the times, it still feels so immersive because the developers took the time to have the characters emote properly. It's something that can be seen in so many more cutscenes throughout the game. The end of Assault on the Control Room, the beginning of 2 betrayals, even Chief's hesitation to kill Captain Keyes after he's been infected by the Flood. They give so much personality to these characters in terms of writing and how they interact during cutscenes, making for a much more satisfying experience. This single cutscene has so much quality to it because it sells 3 main strengths of the game's story perfectly. This is the kind of visual storytelling that keeps you hooked, and Halo understands this to a T. Afterwards, the level continues as you're given a pistol. Eventually, you make your way through the ship and gain some ammo, introducing the player to the combat. Now at this point, you don't really have a grasp of the scope of the combat since the Pillar of Autumn consists of hallways, as opposed to the more open fields we know in later levels. But we do get a grasp on the control scheme and how exactly gunplay feels. Now the thing about a lot of FPS shooters at the time was how a lot of the controllers weren't really made to take advantage of the nature of FPS mechanics. For example, the N64 controller only had one joystick, meaning that you weren't able to stray sideways or look up and down. There was no real way for a lot of game developers to emulate the feel of an FPS because of limitations of the consoles and their control schemes. And it's here where Halo not only reinvents FPS controls, but defines them. With the more advanced button layout of the Xbox controller, as well as the addition of a second joystick, the controls feel far more distinct and give the player far more choices than ever before. Now you can use the left stick to move your character while using the right stick to move your point of view. You can freely look in all directions instead of being limited by the layout of the controller. Of all the additions to the control scheme, this is by far the most useful as it makes the game far more accessible and less frustrating. And that's not all. The control map of Halo is perfectly made with the game's playstyle in mind, fully taking advantage of the possibilities of an FPS. It's surprisingly intuitive and easy to get behind, with each button having its own unique role in how the player controls Master Chief. A makes you jump, Y lets you switch weapons, B allows you to perform melee attacks, and X can be used for a variety of different actions, reloading your weapon, swapping weapons, and interacting with environments. The right trigger makes you fire your gun, the left trigger makes you throw grenades, the black button lets you swap between different grenade types, and the white button turns on your flashlight in dark areas. There's also two additional actions you can take by pressing down on the left and right analog stick. The left stick allows you to crouch and hide behind cover, and the right stick allows you to use a weapon scope to zoom in on enemies from a distance. Halo provides the player with so many different options with its profound control map, in a way that revolutionizes how FPS games control more than any other game in the genre. Needless to say, it's a masterpiece of game design. So from here, your mission is to escape the ship while taking down any Covenant in your way. You eventually escape on a lifeboat with a few other Marines as you begin your descent on the mysterious ring. You embrace for impact as your drop into the atmosphere intensifies, and you finally land with a huge crash. You eventually regain consciousness as you and Cortana are the only survivors. You then step out of your escape pod to get a close look at the ring's surface. You see an uncharted world, lush and blooming with life. And in spite of how peaceful it looks, there's still a sense of unease. No sign of life anywhere, with nothing but the soft soundtrack to accompany you. No cutscene, no dramatic dialogue, just you and the ambience of the environment. What I just described to you is what I believe is the biggest contributor to what separates Halo from every other FPS franchise: its atmosphere. Halo is a sovereign in using its environment to tell its story. As you travel deeper into Halo, you really start to pick up on a lot of details that help sell the game's setting. There's no signs of life, and yet you frequently venture across ancient structures created by an advanced civilization. The Forerunners are only ever mentioned in the past tense, and they're only briefly spoken of throughout the game. And yet the structures they left behind tell you so much about them. There's so much mystique surrounding their culture and their history. A mighty race of aliens capable of creating an entire ring-shaped planet. They seem to be really powerful, yet they vanished without a trace. But in spite of them being long gone, their presence still lingers on the surface of this monolith. But there's more to the atmosphere than the mystery of the Forerunners. As you venture through Halo, you start to get swept away by how immersive the environment actually is. There's plenty of dark areas that have just the right amount of lighting, allowing them to be moody and mysterious without sacrificing the player's visibility. Cold, hollow walkways that have enough space for firefights and exploration, preventing them from feeling narrow. Part of the reason why Halo's atmosphere is so captivating is that they actually put time into drawing you into these levels and how they're actually designed, instead of just making them generic battlefields for mindless firefights. There's so many moments throughout Halo where you're walking through wide open areas with no enemy encounters to stall progression of the story. You're given a chance to just look around, take it all in, admire the level design, appreciate the time Bungie put into making each of these environments feel intrinsic and distinct. There's even moments with no music at all, where your only company is the ambience of your surroundings, the gentle rain of the jungle. The light breeze of snowy mountains. The echoes of abandoned facilities. You don't need dramatic music to reel you into these places because you feel it. You get the impression that you're really within these places because the game is so delicate in how it inserts you into all these levels. And there's a large variety to the levels and their landscapes, so it feels like you're always going somewhere new. Lush forests, wide open canyons, snowy mountains, underground tunnels, alien spaceships, and dark swampy areas. But it's not just the way each level looks and sounds, it's also how much fun it is to play through them. You can appreciate how well designed most of the game is because it's tangible and plays very well. The most notable example is how the first and second level greatly contrast each other. The Pillar of Autumn is a compilation of corridors, a simple but familiar kind of level that provides comfortable space for the player. It's designed in a way that helps them get used to the game's controls, combat, and enemy AI. But this level is immediately followed by this highly expansive and wide open area where you're no longer restricted in terms of where you can go. You're given a broad feeling of freedom as you walk into this incredibly open space, free to go wherever you want. The great thing about Halo's level design is that it encourages exploration. There's no invisible walls, and the spaces you venture through are incredibly open-ended. Obviously, there's a linear path to completing the main story, but the game doesn't force you to go in a straight line the entire time. You're allowed to travel across each area at your own leisure, decide which paths to go, which can make enemy encounters feel different every time you play. But the best part about Halo's exploration is that it rewards you for observing your surroundings, checking every corner there is to see. You can find hidden weapons, extra ammunition, and special armor upgrades that give you a huge advantage. It's something the developers put in to let you play through the game at your own pace, adding more enjoyment to how you progress through each stage. And if that's still not enough for you, there's one more tremendous strength to Halo's atmosphere. It's music. Unlike a lot of generic action-packed orchestras or heavy metal usually associated with shooting games, Halo takes a very different approach. The game's soundtrack consists of very gentle and melancholy pieces of music. You'd think this would be unfitting due to the intense action of the gameplay, but it manages to synchronize beautifully with the visuals and layout of the levels, making the music feel natural and never out of place. It doesn't focus on trying to build your adrenaline like Gears of War or Doom. It instead focuses on trying to immerse you in the game's world by being soothing and majestic. The music isn't orchestrated to be intense, and yet it feels intense for how perfectly it immerses you in the setting. The delicate instruments accompanied by the heavenly chants and choir evokes an emotion that feels so profound and meaningful. It cooperates with the intense sound design of gunfights to create a unique experience no other game had at the time, adding to the feel of the combat in a subtle and sophisticated manner. With all these things put together, Halo masters the art of atmosphere. The level design, music, and pacing of each level make for an incredible experience. It just feels so real in spite of being a collection of code and polygons. Of course, Halo wouldn't be where it is today if its gameplay wasn't as immersive. And the gameplay is incredible, not just for how well it controls, but for how much detail and variety Bungie added to its mechanics. Combat is quick and aggressive without being overwhelming. It's not so fast that you lose control of your aim, so you can properly focus on damaging enemies while avoiding fire. Enemy encounters are frequent, but also spread apart properly, giving you time to restock on resources and weapons. Additionally, your shields help you fight with the disadvantage of outdoor environments and lack of cover, making battles hardened without the player having to worry about being in the open. It also sports a very interesting utility. Now on a surface level this doesn't seem like a lot, but when you cut into the meat of each weapon, that's where it gets interesting. In Halo, every weapon has a unique role, with each one having its own strengths and weaknesses. They have different behaviors and viable uses in certain situations that give them a purpose. The plasma pistol, for instance, does very little damage with small individual shots, but a fully charged shot can instantly drain an elite's shields, making them a very useful tool when taking on elites. The game offers a small yet versatile set of weapons that all feel distinct from each other, giving the player several ways they can quickly deal damage. Of course, the game doesn't simply allow you to exploit this, as it restricts the number of guns you can carry at one time. In many FPS games before Halo, there was really no limit to how many guns you can carry at one time, making you into a walking arsenal of firepower. Halo doesn't allow this, as it keeps the number of guns you can carry to 2. On a surface level, this may seem like it would make the player weaker and more vulnerable, but if anything, it strengthens the player. Since you're limited to 2 weapons at a time, you won't always have the best one for each situation, requiring you to plan out how you'll engage enemies. It helps the player develop their problem-solving skills by making them think outside the box. You're encouraged to experiment with different guns instead of just keeping one set the entire time, which can be helpful when facing certain enemies. It also adds a sense of strategy to the game by adding a form of decision-making that affects the flow of battle. Do you give up the Magnum in exchange for the plasma pistol? Do you stock up on assault rifle ammo or exchange it for the shotgun? Because of this mechanic, encounters can be done in different ways, adding variety to each playthrough. Instead of always using the same weapons in each level, you can use a different set of tools each time that can change how the fight plays out. There's no one way to engage with enemies in a certain level, creating a new experience almost every time you play. With the dozens of ways the player can deal damage combined with the strategy and decision making provided by the 2-gun limit, Halo adds experimentation to the FPS genre in a way that very few other games have done before. And it's made even more fun by how fantastic the AI is, for both allies and enemies. The Marines who fight by your side have an incredible array of different reactions to just about every possible scenario. There's such a huge collection of different behaviors and voice clips that it's impossible to go over them all. When they kill an enemy, sometimes they gloat the dead body while shooting the corpse. When you kill an enemy in front of them, they sometimes patronize you for stealing their kill. And if you decide to go crazy and kill a fellow Marine, they actually turn on you with unique dialogue before shooting at you. The countless ways the Marines interact with you and each other makes them incredibly lifelike, and a fun addition to the gameplay even if they tend to be useless. The AI of the Covenant is also fantastic. Each of the 4 classes you encounter have a unique role in combat. They're also highly reactionary, capable of adapting to your actions. And unlike a lot of other shooters where enemy NPCs stand in one place, the Covenant actually move around and coordinate their own actions. The way they behave encourages the player to make split-second decisions in battle. They can be smart and strategic, and even display different behaviors as you defeat them. If you kill an elite, grunts and jackals cower and run away in fear as their form of leadership is gone. They practically invented a deep and complex decision tree for ally and enemy AI, which really shows how ahead of its time it is. Halo's gameplay is rich with endless detail, and so many different possibilities for the player to choose from. You're given a large amount of freedom to play the game in any way that you like, with intense combat to boot. It provides an authentic challenge that tests your skills properly, unlike so many other shooters where you just brainlessly move forward and shoot people. This game is 20 years old and its gameplay hasn't aged a day. It's marvelous to see how well it holds up by today's standards, making Halo a timeless experience for any gamer of any age. As for the game's narrative, it's actually pretty good if a bit by the numbers. It's the usual humans versus aliens kind of sci-fi, but it plays itself straightforward, making it easier to get invested. Because of its simplicity, Halo's storytelling is very effective in getting players up to speed on the core plot. We discovered that this giant ring-shaped planet is actually a weapon capable of destruction on a galactic scale. The Covenant plan to use it against humanity, and we must stop them by beating them to the control room. Once again, the stakes and core premise are established, in a way that's not overly complicated or hard to understand. As the game introduces you to its main conflict, it keeps filling that story at a brisk pace. There's an aspect to each of the game's first 5 levels that help you get immersed in its setting and characters. Your ship is under attack and you need to escape. You have to regroup with your fellow soldiers after landing on Halo. You have to rescue Captain Keyes and he gives you information on Halo. You have to find the map leading to Halo's control room. And then you battle the Covenant in Halo's control facility. Each objective is simple and to the point, even if it makes the story feel too predictable and obvious. For the first half, Halo's narrative isn't anything special. It's just the usual cliché story about humans at war with aliens. Nothing really original or all too interesting long term. That is, until the second half of the game begins, with a level that goes by the name of 343 Guilty Spark. After making your way to the control room, you're told that the Covenant have found something. Something horrible. You're warned by Cortana to find Keyes, for he must be stopped before he does something irreversible. You travel to a mysterious swamp where Keyes' last transmission was made, with the words "well enough alone" ominously appearing on screen. Thus, the level begins. You make your way through the swamp in search of Keyes until you eventually find an abandoned pelican. You hear an ominous distress signal coming from inside, trying to send a warning of a new threat.
Dropship Victor 9, pillar of bottom. Assistance. We are under attack by some new kind of hostile. It isn't Covenant. Captain Keyes has been captured by hostiles. Dug in at a large structure in a swamp here. Can hold out.
It seems like a typical swamp with natural ambient noise, but in spite of the seemingly typical environment, you still get this uneasy feeling as you proceed. There's something about this swamp that sets up a suspicious atmosphere, particularly because of how different it feels from every other level up to this point. The first 5 levels took place in bright and wide open spaces, and you also had several Marines assisting you in battle. Even when they took place in more closed up and less lit up spaces, they were still reasonably bright and never really created a sense of dread. But the beginning of 343 Guilty Spark is the opposite of all these things. The design of the swamp is narrow, creating a suffocating feeling as you traverse the area. The swamp is also completely dark, with no source of light to guide your path. And on top of that, you're completely alone, with no Marines by your side to help you fight the enemy. The first 5 levels made you feel like an unstoppable super soldier. You were leading the charge as you and the Marines battled the Covenant. But none of that is present here. 343 Guilty Spark is set up in a way that makes you feel more vulnerable and less powerful. You're in a place that isn't like anything you've encountered so far, with all of its aspects intended to put you in a disadvantage. This, combined with Cortana's warning and the Pelican's distress signal, implies that something is very wrong. You don't know what it is, but the build-up to what it could be is nothing short of intimidating. As you proceed, you may end up seeing mysterious figures running in the shadows. Figures that are clearly not Covenant. And as you continue, you're given a lot more hints that this really isn't a happy place to be. A downed Covenant patrol ship, yellow dots on your radar in spite of no Marines being in sight, faint growling noises, the sound of gunfire as Covenant run out of the structure fleeing for their lives. Even when you encounter a few squads of Covenant, you'll notice that none of them are accompanied by an elite, so something must have killed them. Finally, you make your way into the facility, continuing your search for keys. But with everything that happened outside in the swamp, you have plenty of reasons to feel nervous. But you shouldn't be nervous, right? After all, you're Master Chief, humanity's greatest hero who's defeated countless Covenant. Whatever's happening, it shouldn't be enough to frighten you. But then you go deeper into the structure, and you're once again given reasons to be afraid. Mysterious yellow liquid dripping from the ceiling, a mangled jackal lying in one of the corridors, the walls drenched in its blood. And eventually you find a crazed Marine who shoots you if you approach him, hysterically crying for his life in fear of being turned into one of those things.
Stay back! Stay back! You're not turning me into one of those things! I'll blow your brains out!
As you leave him behind, you see the aftermath of a battle that took place in the same room. Dead Covenant all over, with their flesh and blood staining the floors and ceiling, fire flickering in the corner of the room. And the last hint you find in the horrors of this place is 2 Marine bodies, lying dead and alone, with no one else to be seen. The build-up in this section is almost like something out of a horror movie. There are plenty of signs that you're about to encounter something horrifying without directly giving away what it is. And every detail you come across gives you a reason to be scared. And if by some chance you're actually intimidated into leaving and backtracking outside, you'll find another detail that's sure to make you scared. Bodies of more Marines located just outside the entrance. But these bodies weren't here when you first arrived. Someone, or something, placed them there. They killed the Marines and purposely lined them up for the player to find should they go back outside. There is in fact something horrible here. And at this point, you're just as afraid as the Covenant. With no other options left, all you can do is go back inside and make your way to the center. It's here where you find a helmet containing a video log. You put it on and see what became of this soldier and his squad, one key member being Captain Keyes himself. You see them travel through the swamp as you experience a different point of view of the horrors that occurred here, including the discovery of an elite whose chest was ripped open. Eventually they make their way into the room where you found the video log, as they find themselves under attack by a horde of parasite-like creatures. They overwhelm the helpless Marines desperately trying to fight back. And then, it ends. As you regain control of Master Chief, the words "The Flood" appear on screen, as an ominous moment of silence follows. And suddenly, the creatures make a startling entrance, banging on the doors, forcing them open. They surround you from all directions as you desperately fight them off. As the final door opens, you encounter not just the parasites, but several reanimated corpses that lunge at you. And then you come to a horrifying realization. These reanimated corpses are the bodies of dead elites who were infected. Their mangled bodies turn into necrotic monsters relentlessly hunting you. The absence of the elites during the first and second section is given a terrifying answer. And if you're lucky enough to survive this encounter, you're given one simple objective: escape. This is the moment where Halo turns into a survival horror game, where your goal is to make it back outside while avoiding confrontation with these monsters whenever possible. While the game does give you a bit of power to help you out, you're still encouraged to flee from them because of how easily they can overwhelm you. But escaping this place is easier said than done. The first elevator you try to take up explodes and collapses. The second elevator is even worse, as instead of taking you up, it goes down, as you see the blood of the Covenant splattered across the walls. And if you thought these creatures weren't horrifying enough without the ability to use firearms, you then encounter corpses capable of wielding guns. But even beyond that, there's one final detail to be found. one that will truly encapsulate this menace as something to be afraid of. You come across more dead bodies, of both Covenant and Marines, but for some reason these bodies weren't infected, and if you think about it hard enough, you come to a horrifying discovery as to why. Remember the bodies of those Marines you found? Remember the bodies of the jackals and grunts lying around? None of these bodies were infected, in spite of these monsters clearly having the ability to use their corpses as weapons. So why didn't the parasites infect them? Because it's meant to convey something about them. Their intelligence. This entire level was a giant trap that the monsters used to lure Chief into the deepest part of the facility, where he's more vulnerable and easier to kill. These creatures aren't just mindless zombies, they're sharp and sadistic, using their own strategy to increase fear in the player. They don't simply kill their victims, they want them to be afraid and terrified as they die. A strategy to scare you into not thinking, to make you easier for them to kill. And the name of these horrifying monstrosities? The Flood. 343 Guilty Spark is perhaps one of the greatest levels in any FPS video game. Survival horror perfected on so many levels. It uses every trick in the book to terrify you, creating an unsettling environment that fills you with dread for every single second. It also acts as the perfect example of Halo's ability to use the environment to tell its story. There are so many details that foreshadow the threat of the Flood, adding to the tension and rewarding those who take the time to observe their surroundings. Everything from the swamp, to the behavior of the Covenant, to the behavior of the Flood, to the numerous warnings infer so many things about Bungie's expertise in show don't tell. And it's not just its ability to use horror, but what it adds to the story and combat. The Flood also introduces a faction system to the gameplay, something further expanded upon in the level 2 betrayals. What makes this an amazing addition to the game is that you can see different factions fighting each other from a distance. Covenant fighting Flood, Flood fighting Sentinels, Sentinels fighting Covenant. Showing these factions fighting each other is a brilliant detail that presents a piece of Halo's world building that exists outside the player, creating the illusion of a believable and integral world. This also means you have new enemies to fight. Up to this point you were fighting one group of enemies exclusively, but now you're fighting a second and more horrifying group. The Flood are relentless and never stop attacking, constantly throwing themselves at you without regard for taking damage and even dying. Some people make the argument this makes the Flood not fun to fight since their AI makes them stereotypical zombies who run at you in numbers. But Halo is one of the few games to get this type of enemy right. Remember that the Flood aren't just mindless zombies. They're capable of being strategic and sadistic. They don't just mindlessly run at you. They also use firearms trying to damage you from a distance as they close in. They also specialize in flanking, trying to attack you from multiple directions at once. Sometimes they even hide behind objects and wait for you to walk by, attacking you from the next corner when you least expect it. You'll also notice that tactics you used previously are useless against them. Because of their aggressive behavior, combat tactics you used against the Covenant won't work as they don't give you time to strategize and time your attacks. Battling the Flood is less about strategy and more about crowd control. You have to constantly move away but still stay very aggressive, throwing grenades and using strong hitting weapons such as shotguns. You have to be quick and try to find open spaces to move to. They keep you on your toes and force you to use a completely different gameplay strategy you had before. The change in combat style that the Flood offers is one that really puts your endurance to the test. 343 Guilty Spark is a true masterpiece of game design in terms of story, gameplay, and tone. This was the turning point in which Halo went from a generic sci-fi story into something way more impactful. The tone, pace, and atmosphere completely change upon reaching this level, and the stakes are far higher than they were before. After completing what is perhaps the only bad level in the game, you end up fighting another faction called the Sentinels who are tasked with activating Halo. Cortana reveals that Halo was designed by the Forerunners to kill the Flood's source of food, organic life. What started as a basic war between humans and aliens is now a race against time to save all life in the galaxy. It's a very well-paced shift and one that truly cements Halo as a standout example in writing. With Chief and Cortana back together, they must find a way to destroy Halo. To destroy Halo, they must find the Pillar of Autumn and destroy its fusion reactors to trigger an explosion on a massive scale. But to find the Pillar of Autumn, they must find Captain Keyes, who was abducted by the Flood. They manage to track him down in the Truth and Reconciliation, but when they arrive, they receive an ominous message from Keyes to leave him.
I gave you an order, soldier. Now pull out!
He's delirious. In pain. We have to find him.
We continue to hear concerning messages until we find him, but by then, it's too late. He already fell to the Flood. Now we all know Cortana and Chief killed him to prevent the Flood from escaping, but if you take the time to find the terminals in the Anniversary Edition, you'll see that there's actually more to his tragic fate.
I forgot something. What did I... My name. I forgot. Oh, Keyes, Jacob, Captain, Service number 01928-19912-JK. What is that noise? What is that damn noise? Where am I? Covenant captured me, didn't they? Yeah, I can't remember. Keys, Jacob. Oh, God, it hurts. This will never work, you Covenant bastards. I'll never lead you to Earth. Keys, Jacob. Captain. Service number 01928-19912-JK. Oh, God. You don't want Earth. You want everything. Get out of my head. Miranda, is that you?
Forget everything.
No, please. Don't let me forget. Keys. Jacob. Captain. Service number 1928-19912-JK.
No more what you were. Memories. Emotions. All is now ours.
Keys. Jacob. Captain. Service number 01928-19912-JK. You will not have me.
We already do.
Keys held off the flood for as long as he could, doing everything in his power to resist. He actually made the Gravemind struggle to claim his mind, reciting his service number to keep it off of Earth's location. He pushed down those memories as hard as possible, only feeding it memories that wouldn't reveal Earth. He literally endured consecutive hours of psychological torture in which his memories were ripped from his head. He fought literally to the very end, giving the Chief and Cortana enough time to kill him and find the coordinates to the Pillar of Autumn. It's really tragic and unnerving to see how Keys dies. A man of his fortitude and tactical brilliance turned into a mindless servant for a greater evil. But although his death was horrible, he played a crucial role in the destruction of Halo, and saving the galaxy in the process. To end his life in such a way, it's a fantastic end to his arc. So with that, Chief and Cortana escape the ship. As they head for their final mission, we're greeted by a haunting choir, showing us the abandoned ship, alone, in a deserted wasteland. You can practically feel the chorus tugging at your soul, signifying the beginning of the end. The atmosphere is so lonely and empty, yet they make this introduction so majestic and comforting. It's a cutscene that isn't trying to be flashy like a big-budget Hollywood movie. It's there to convey a sense of purpose, and to immerse the player into the game. And this cutscene succeeds in doing just that, immersing the player and preparing them for the final run. Against all odds, Chief and Cortana lead an assault on the ship. They fight through Covenant, Flood, and Sentinels alike, letting nothing stop them. They make their way to the engine room, destroy the fusion reactors, and prepare to make a daring escape. What ensues is the iconic final run, as Chief and Cortana ride the Warthog to the final carrier docked in the ship, and the campaign throws absolutely everything at you in its final attempt to kill you. Covenant, Flood, Sentinels, exploding corridors, flying debris, pillars obscuring your escape route, giant ditches, all sorts of obstacles and obscurities trying to block your path, as the game's iconic theme sounds strongly in the background. This sequence is intense in all the right ways. It makes your heart race as you desperately try to get out alive, fighting off everything it throws at you. It gives you a rush unlike anything the game has thrown at you so far. with the theme further increasing your drive to move forward. Finally, Chief and Cortana make it aboard the carrier. They make a daring escape and watch as Halo is destroyed, along with all the life forms on it. With Chief and Cortana as the only survivors, Cortana claims that it's finally over, while Chief claims that it's just the beginning. The two rest inside the ship, as it floats into the quiet emptiness of space. The camera pans up, and the screen fades to black. That was magnificent. Halo Combat Evolved is truly a timeless masterpiece. Looking back on it 20 years later, it still amazes me on so many levels. This game has aged astoundingly in every possible aspect. The controls are revolutionary, setting the standard for all FPS games to follow. The story is also gripping and plays out very well. It reveals just enough to give the world depth, but left enough unknown to make it interesting. And the way it uses its atmosphere to immerse you is breathtaking. The music, ambience, pacing, and variety of different landscapes keeps you hooked and motivated to keep on playing. The combat is ahead of its time on so many levels. It's intense, feels authentic, and the way the AI interacts with you adds so much replay value. The people at Bungie who worked on this game had such a strong passion for atmosphere, visual storytelling, and video games as an art form, and you can tell from the precious time they put into making the game as good as it was. This game not only defied people's expectations of what an FPS can do, but surpassed them. It made so many great innovations that are now widely used, making it something that was truly ahead of its time. It offers a truly satisfying experience from beginning to end, making it the console-defining game of the Xbox. Bungie didn't just rush this one out the door for a quick buck like so many developers tend to do these days. They took their precious time to polish every aspect of this game. They wanted it to be in absolute peak condition before it was ready, and they succeeded. It makes the final product a lot more impressive considering the development hell it was going through. Think about that. A video game stuck in development hell that manages to become a beloved work of art that millions around the world still talk about 20 years later. That's practically unheard of, especially in modern times when games stuck in development hell tend to suck. It's practically a miracle Halo turned out as well as it did, because I really can't imagine what the landscape of gaming would look like if it wasn't so successful. It's a game that managed to take a genre of gaming that was slowly becoming stale and transformed it into something completely different. It's something that really showcases the potential of video games as an art form, in a way that very few games have lived up to. It really feels like the people behind this game cared about what they were doing, and wanted to give people a truly rewarding and enriching experience. The way Halo put the FPS genre on the map and transformed it into something bigger is a feeling that just sticks with you. It's actually haunting in a way, like that choir that greets you when you boot it up for the first time. To think that this unsuspecting video game about a man in a big green armor suit fighting aliens is still in our minds 20 years later. But that's what makes it so great. The fact that we're still talking about it after all this time is a real testimony to its legacy. If by some chance you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend that you do. It's a video game that everyone should experience at least once, because it's certainly worth it to see it firsthand. All the wonder, artistic vision, and the unforgettable journey of Halo Combat Evolved, a legendary masterpiece. Thanks for checking out my review. If you liked what you saw here and would like to support me, check out my Patreon in the description. Every little bit helps and I always appreciate those who support my work. Until next time, stay cool.